Catching flies.
So thank you for being here today. I am very excited because we have CAConrad with us today. And I was just hearing about Phila's relationship to CA. I attended one of your workshops at the ZHDK, a writing one that was organized by Matt Hansen and Ludovica Parenzi. And I was absolutely blown away. It left me inspired and dreamy and also very open to the world. And it was your freewheeling attitude to savor experience and to heighten our mind and our synthetic experiences. So we're having to huddle a bit here today. I just want to make a remark that in Zurich, space is becoming more and more limited. We have had this experience now with Pascal Buechler and our collaboration with Downstairs. And I mention this because there's also a big demonstration today, so I don't know if some of you are going to that, but there's the Wohnungs demonstration to combat the horrendous rents in Zurich. So maybe we should all go to that right after. And we're here also, some of you might have been here at the opening, but we're here in Pascal Buechler's wonderful exhibition, which opened yesterday. So I kindly ask you to be careful of the curtains, not lean against them. And today we're also very excited because we will be, please come in. We're going to be releasing a fold-out that we made especially for today. And CA has graciously made a poem for Zurich. And there is an excerpt from Listen to the Golden Boomerang Return. And we also have copies of the book that you can buy, and the fold-out is for free, and you can have it signed by CA later. I would like to thank Landisungia for their support, and also Pink Cross for helping support this project. And this event is in collaboration with Shedhane. Tomorrow, CA will be conducting a workshop as part of the Institute for Embodied Creative Practices with Isabel Lewis, but many other practitioners. And if you want to participate, you can register on the website. I will now formally introduce CA. CAConrad has worked with the ancient technologies of poetry and ritual since 1975. They received the Ruth Lilly Poetry Prize, a Penn Josephine Miles Award, a Creative Grant Capital, a Pew Fellowship, and a Lambda Award. And the Book of Frank is now available in 9 different languages, and they exhibit poems as art objects with recent solo shows in Spain and Portugal. And I received a fantastic omen this week. I had a little blackbird visitor that came into my apartment. And I mention this because I look forward to hearing about CA's bird encounters. And I thought also that I would start this session with a bit of reciprocity, because I think that's also something that you will be speaking about. And I would like to give you the quintessential campy Swiss object.
Oh, wow.
So, to maybe awaken the senses.
Is this for me?
This for you.
Oh my god, thank you. You can wear it today. I really love it, thank you.
It's a bit weathered.
Oh, I like that about it.
And with that
Lovely
said,
cowboy.
I will leave the floor to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for bringing me. Thank you everybody at Last Tango and for the workshop tomorrow. I'm very excited about all of those. And the opening yesterday was amazing. Your opening was beautiful. Everybody, because if you weren't here last night, you can see the work over here. Okay, I am this? You can hear me? Okay. I'm not going to read anything from this book, but I'm starting from this book because it led to the material that I'm going to be talking about. And so I'm talking about 3 books. This is the first one. This one came out before the pandemic. While standing in line for death, the main ritual of this book, the opening ritual, deals with, at the top there is my boyfriend Earth, who, when we were much younger in the 1980s and 90s, he was one of the main organizers of ACT UP. Are you familiar with ACT UP? It's AIDS Coalition to Unleash Power, it's AIDS activism. And so that was, when I was a teenager, that was my first introduction to activism on the streets, because I grew up in the countryside where, there's just cows to hear you. And this beautiful bell. But I bring this up because after we lost over half of everybody we knew to AIDS in the 80s and 90s, and then he was burnt out from all the activism, not just the activism, but the work. Because when that many people are sick, there's a lot of work to be done. People need groceries, people need to go to the doctor. And the reason there was and that doesn't get talked about. First of all, so few of us survived. Almost everybody died, it seemed. I'm Generation X, which is like the smallest generation in American history, at least. It might be the same with Europe. But to have that many people die of AIDS in your community, it just means we're even less, we're smaller. So what doesn't get talked about was the extraordinary amount of work there was to do during AIDS. But the other thing that doesn't get talked about is why there was so much work to do. And the reason there was so much work to do is because 98% of every heterosexual we knew left, abandoned the community. So we were completely isolated. I used to get into huge fights with people at parties in the late 90s and early 2000s. Said, your community's so isolated. I'm like, yeah, because we had no choice to be. It's sort of almost like I'm supposed to be ashamed that we were isolated. No, you should be ashamed for isolating us. That's kind of where I went with it. But I got into a lot of, I'm born to ruin a party. Let's put it that way. I don't mind. But anyway, he went to a queer spiritual community, and I use the word spiritual loosely, in Tennessee, to work in the gardens. Because he not only was an AIDS activist, he was also an environmental activist. And we don't know who did this to him, but he was meditating in a cave on the side of the mountain. I had just spoken to him on the phone a few days prior to this incident that I'm going to tell you about, and I was going to go down and visit the cave. He was just down there for a little while. Men went into the cave where he was at, and they bound him and gagged him and tortured him and raped him and then covered him in gasoline and burned him alive. And the police, and there's been a documentary made about this, and his identical twin brother, he has a brother that looks exactly like him, came into the queer bookstore I was working at the time, and it was completely amazed seeing him, which really threw me. But the police told me that he had killed himself. And I said, well, that doesn't make any sense. Then his brother came in and showed me the medical examiner's report, and there was just no way he could have killed himself. There were no empty gasoline containers. This is a cave on a mountainside. You know what I mean? I don't know how you're supposed to cover yourself in gasoline magically. Plus, his wrists and ankles were tied behind him. And he was raped. I don't know how you rape yourself. But to be honest with you, the police covered up the rape as well in the beginning. I didn't find out about the rape till years later when we were down there making the documentary. We spoke to the paramedic, the EMT workers, emergency workers who were the first ones there, and they said, well, he was raped. I was like, well, that is news to me. And he said, well, yeah, his underwear were down around his ankles, and he was definitely raped. And so, of course, anyway, but the police didn't want to deal with it, or they knew who did it, and they were protecting them. The sheriff, who had said he was going to arrest me the next time I came and commit me to an insane asylum, this is his words, he was eventually thrown in prison. He's in prison for raping women in the jail. He would arrest these women and then rape them. His deputies I had to deal with, 3 of these deputies, were all fired and sent to prison for shutting down meth labs and keeping the drugs and the money. And the district attorney, who I was counting on to invite the FBI to investigate, who refused to do that, was disbarred and fired for corruption. So all of the men I had to deal with were just evil. And it's pretty much the way the United States is. The United States is very overrated. People have this idea about how great it is. It's not true. It's a dangerous, dangerous place. 45,000 US citizens were shot and killed last year. There were 80,000 shot, 45,000 people died from those gunshot wounds. There were 700 mass shootings. Now, one mass shooting is one shooter shooting 4 more people. There were 700 times last year, young men woke up and said, I'm going to go to the grocery store and start shooting people. I taught earlier this year in the state of Michigan in a university that had just had a mass shooting in the building. 2 of my students were in the building when it happened, and they could hear the gunfire approaching their room, and they showed me where they were hiding. But then the police killed the shooter first, so they got to live. That's how they put it. And then I teach them. So when I go home from here, I start driving to Colorado to teach at Naropa. It's a school started by, it's the only Buddhist university in the United States, but right at the edge of campus last year. Anne Waldman, this amazing poet, Anne Waldman, who helped found the school, the writing program with Allen Ginsberg in the 1974, I think. She called me up and she said, do you see what's happening in the grocery store that you and I just went to recently? I drove her to the grocery store because I was in my car with me. And I tuned into my computer, and a man went into that grocery store and shot and killed 15 people. And we could see the bodies all over the grocery store with, like, their faces were blurred, but there was blood on the tofu that we had just, it's just a really frightening time right now. When I was a child in the 70s, there would be 1 mass shooting a year. Now there are more than several a day happening. And what is the solution? Nobody's looking for it. Hello. Please come in. Oh, no. I bring all this up because this is all impacting this situation here. Well, I will say this. So I tried to get the police to investigate his rape and murder. They refused. And the sheriff said that he was going to arrest me if I went back. I was down there, and my friend said, you got to get out of here. And I could hear the sirens coming, and I drove away and ruined my car. Like, I scraped it on this wall. But I had to get out of there because that sheriff was definitely going to do something horrible to me. So I got out just in time. And then after I left that time, I went home, and he sent the Philadelphia police to my home. And they invited me into the hallway. And one of them grabbed me by my hair and slammed my head against the wall, while another one kicked my feet apart, while the third one screamed in my ear to leave their brothers in blue in Tennessee alone. And that's when the depression started. So prior to his murder and rape, I was, like I said, we already buried half of everybody we knew to AIDS, in those years leading up to this. I thought the worst years of our life were behind us, and then that happened. But when I was assaulted by the police, that's when the depression set in, and I was, before his death, I was a dancer, I was very athletic, and then this depression set in, I gained a lot of weight, it just ruined my life. So eventually I said, I started doing these rituals in 2005 to write with, and I thought, they could be doing more than just helping me write poems. So I did a ritual with this crystal you see here at the bottom. So last time I saw him alive, he gave me this crystal. It was in his pocket for almost 2 years, like over a year and a half. And the thing is, we use crystals in industry and science constantly. They're used in computers, cell phones. They have a very consistent current. There's a wonderful story about this woman named Judith in London, who in the early 20th century, before clocks were pervasive, she would go with this watch, this ruby watch, to have it set by the conservator, that they would look at the stars to see what the right time was. And then she had a subscription service with her ruby watch. Rubies keep a very clear current. And then people would pay her money to set their clocks and their businesses and their homes against her watch. I'm fascinated by time and how we've been dealing with it. I believe I was feeling a lot of ideas about time in your show last night. Your art, like especially looking at the fabric and the clothing behind that glass. There's something about time in this room that I find compelling and amazing. But what we also know is that crystals hold on to information. So they have the chambers inside can actually cling to information. We don't know, at least if industry and science do know, they're not sharing it. But I decided to use that. So this was in his pocket for a very long time. So what I did is I inserted it in my hair wrap, and then I started swallowing a smaller crystal each day. And that crystal, the job of that crystal was to extract his information out of his crystal and embed it in my blood, bones, and tissue. And it worked. Within a week, I was completely changed. And I've just been getting healthier and better ever since. But that ritual led to this whole project. This is a book-length project called Amanda Paradise, Resurrect Extinct Vibration. And, this is the British version, so that Penguin UK, so the book that's for sale here is the new book that UK Penguin also published. They insisted on using this title, which was fine. Look, I was grateful for the publisher, but the bigger the publisher, the least, the less control you have over everything. But Amanda Paradise, what I did was, let me just say this, according to the World Wildlife Association, the headquarters are in Paris. They have a biennial report, and that happens every 2 years. The next one is coming out next month. This is from 2 years ago, 70% of the wildlife on the planet has vanished. Especially in the European numbers and UK numbers of flying insects are now the lowest on planet Earth. You've lost almost 80% of your flying insects. That's why the bird populations are plummeting, because there's so many birds that depend on the insects. This is what I did. I chose to travel around the United States. I got a creative capital grant to do this, which was very exciting. And I went to all 50 states, and I would lie on the ground on this blanket. This is a quote from a manifesto I wrote, which is, I only write anti-manifestos. I'm not interested in manifestos are usually written by tyrants, like Andre Breton, the surrealist. He's just an awful man. But what I did was I started to investigate. So I'm almost 60 years old now, and in my lifetime we've lost 70% of the wildlife on the planet. So I took the creatures that had become extinct in my lifetime, which are many, and they're all on the internet. There's sounds, video of many of them, and I would lie on this blanket around the United States, and then I would flood my body with the recordings made by mammalogists, anthropologists, entomologists, because there are even insects. We're talking about ornithologists, many birds that have vanished. And I was convinced that this might be depressing in the middle of the country. I mean, things are pretty dangerous in the States right now, like I was saying earlier. One of the things as well, let me go back to this book. One of the things about this book is there are also 3 political action rituals. So at the time when I was writing this book, the state of North Carolina was the only state that had an anti-lesbian, gay, transgender law. And I moved down there. I was living on the road for over a decade before COVID lockdown. And I was supposed to just be on the road for a year, and it turned into a decade. I just didn't want to live anywhere. I didn't really want to live in the United States, so I just thought I'll just keep moving. And that's how I wrote the book, Amanda Paradise, while I was in motion. But there were 3 rituals I did down there because we needed to get this law overturned. I was meeting many young, queer people at these protests who went through conversion therapy. Have you heard of this? It's these churches in the States. It's legal. You have to understand, the Christians who are dealing with the United States are very different. They're the type of Christians Europe got rid of 500 years ago. These are real honest to God, witch-burning Christians. They're real. They're absolutely real. And there are now 30 states with these laws. In 2016, there was one state. Now there are 30 states. 30 states with anti-lesbian, gay, transgender laws in the United States right now. There are only 50 states. And there are 150 brand new laws against lesbian and queer people coming out in November, 5 months from now. That are on the ballot. I don't know what we're supposed to do. It was one thing when there was one state, you could move there and deal with it, but when it's almost the whole country, and Trump pretty much looks like he's going to win. I would be surprised if he didn't win. And he just last week had a meeting with a pastor of a church who's calling for the execution of trans people who help young trans people get their health care. In the state of Idaho, where I was just teaching last month, there were a few transgender students in my class who were terrified of even leaving the city because you can spend the rest of your life in prison in the state of Idaho for helping a young trans person cross the border for their health care. It's really madness what's going on. And in the state of Louisiana and Texas now has it's advertised on television. It's this woman, you have to see this to believe it. She's got long hair. She's got a cross there without Jesus on it because she's born again. And she's like very soft Christian music playing. And she's saying, if you know somebody who's had an abortion since the law was passed in Texas, call this number. And if we can prove it, you can get a reward of $10,000. So they're giving $10,000 to people to arrest women who've had abortions. Like, that's how bananas it is. When I say witch-burning Christians, I mean it. Like, they show up. Trump just had a rally in the state of New Jersey 2 weeks ago. It's the largest rally any president has ever had in the United States. 82,000 people showed up. And all the Christians are in the front with their crosses praying for him because he gave them the Supreme Court to overturn abortion. So they pray for him. He does this like, oh, I love you and I love Jesus, which I don't believe. And, it's just this false prophet sort of engineered right into the Armageddon or whatever they want to do. But anyway, I wanted to bring that up, because why not? Anyway, so I was doing this. I don't know, what am I supposed to do? It's reality. And, all right, let me just say, this was something I really enjoyed doing. I also did this to write A Minute Paradise. So, can you see that? Should I make it bigger? Can you see that? Oh, okay, good. So I used copper water bottles because copper is a very highly conductive metal, and I filled them with equal amounts of amethyst, carnelian, and rose quartz, and then filled it with water like you would a battery, up to about an inch for freezing, and then I buried them in Minneapolis. Minneapolis, Missouri, which is right here. Can you see my cursor? Okay, good. So this is Minneapolis. It's right, have you ever been to Minneapolis? It's right, it's like, it shares, there's a bridge between Minneapolis and St. Paul. Now, I didn't want to do St. Paul because St. Paul is, the one person in the New Testament who didn't meet Jesus and hates queers and hates women. So I don't have anything to do with him. So I think he's probably a big root problem we have on this planet, Paul. So he fell off a horse in Damascus, whatever, you know what I mean? Like, I don't have time for that. But Minneapolis is a very American word. It's the Lakota Native American word for water, fused with the Greek word for city. So it's Water City, Minneapolis. Very beautiful word. And then down here in Memphis, Tennessee. Memphis, Tennessee is named after the much-fabled ancient city of Memphis, Egypt. Memphis, Egypt sits right at the mouth of the Nile, taking in all that energy. And then, at least this is what I read about, there would be ceremonial magician priests, I guess we would say, who would do ritual in Memphis, Egypt, and send that energy due west to Giza, where the pyramids were, which is not that far, apparently. And this is right at the jawbone of the Mississippi River, after 323 tributary rivers have fed it. It's massive. Like the river that's outside that window is huge, but imagining it like 5 times wider. That's where the Mississippi looks like at this point. So they literally named this city after the city at the gateway to the Nile. And then these rich billionaires built a 40-story glass pyramid, an homage to Egypt, I guess, right on the banks. Elvis's Graceland and then the pyramid. I don't know what's going on. But then also over here is Cheyenne, Wyoming. So in the book, I discuss how when I was a teenager and all of my friends were dying of AIDS, there was this older trans woman who was named Peppy, and she's about 20 years older than my friends and I, and she was a real solid rock. She was good at, because we were freaked out about all this death. We were going to funerals constantly, several weeks sometimes, and there was only one church that would allow any dead body in it to die of AIDS. All the other churches banned AIDS funerals. So there was just this one church. So you had to go to the same church over and over and over and over and over. It was awful. But Peppy was really good at keeping us grounded and keeping us, to not be like falling into prey to drugs and alcohol with your fear and all that. She wound up dying of AIDS in the 90s, but she had a sister who died, she was Native American, and she had a sister in Cheyenne that she wanted to visit before she died, and she did not. So that's why I chose Cheyenne. And then you'll see in the middle, see that's Omaha, Nebraska. Omaha, Nebraska is the seat of this grid. So there were 4 of these bottles I planted. So it took months to set this up. And then when I would be driving across the country, I would go to Omaha, and I would sit there, and I would, with a compass, align myself with Minneapolis first, and then eat a little bit of dirt from the Minneapolis location, and then listen to an ambient recording I made of the birds or whatever was going, the wind, sometimes murmuring of people in the background or cars, and then I would write. And then I would go Deasil, the direction of the sun, to Memphis, eat a bit of Memphis dirt, listen to a recording, and then Cheyenne. Very different dirt to eat with each of these, very different. Cheyenne is already like a high desert, getting into, it's almost 2 miles in the sky. Anyway, and then after this book was finished, I dug all those up. I had to be very careful because these farmers will shoot you. They're thinking you're building planting landmines or something. It's America after all. Very overrated, I can't say it enough. Let's see. So I was writing Amanda Paradise before COVID lockdown, but then I wound up, had to be pulled off the road because I was living on the road. I had no home, and by choice. And my publisher in the States said, what are you doing? What are you doing? You need to get off the road. You can't be living on the road like this. Everybody's sick and dying. So they put me there's a little apartment for visiting authors. This is in the city of Seattle, by the way, Washington, which if you're not familiar, it's off the Pacific Ocean and very close to Canada. And it was great to be able to do that. But I immediately started thinking about AIDS during the COVID lockdown because of watching people's behavior and the way they were reacting to everything. I was like, gosh, this is so familiar. So a lot of the poems at the end of the book are about that. Now I'm going to make them bigger so that I can see them and read them as well. Can you see that? For years after friends died of AIDS, they still danced with me in my dreams. The survivors of the bubonic plague danced with their friends. Who will dance with whom in a year? Let's keep safe, dance together in person. M drew his face the day he was diagnosed HIV positive, and kept drawing as his face changed. They were sublime, like Monk's self-portrait with Spanish flu. He called me on his deathbed at his parents' home to say his father was in the backyard, burning the stack of drawings. I wanted to make him stop. Please don't, he said. It's his last chance to deny me. How can I deny him that?
My grandmother Pearl said, throw your wallet away the moment you lose your job. There are many excuses for losing jobs where I grew up. She was the only person in my family in the 1980s who asked about dying lovers and friends. She said to me after a week with 3 funerals, there was a beginning to this pain. Now you know the middle, but the end too must show itself. When you survive this, love will destroy all doubt. We had much to leave behind in order to follow the river to the sea. My grandfather said, always remember you come from people who wash after work. Migration can change a family. Some die before the end, others born along the way. I know my poems by their shapes and have felt their edges in my dreams. The side of a poem rubbed against my cheek like a bone comb or a lover's toe. So that led to this. So like I just said, I was working with extinct animals with Amanda Paradise. So, oh, that's a nice accompaniment. It's like a nice song. I like it. No, let's just keep, oh, we don't have to do anything. I think it's fine. I think it's over. Was that an air raid? What was that? It sounded funny. Not that an air raid is funny. Well, hi. Hello. So while Amanda Paradise was working with creatures who become extinct, by the time I finished that book, I realized I needed to work with creatures who are thriving, creatures who are on this planet, and nobody can do anything about it. Like, and they're huge numbers, kind of creatures that human beings have been trying to exterminate for centuries and cannot. That's who I wanted to work with. Now, like I said, I was stuck in Seattle during COVID lockdowns. Oh, and then this is the UK penguin version that's over there. That's a Nicole Eisenman paint. Do you know Nicole Eisenman's work? She had this great retrospective at Whitechapel in London last year, and now she's in, anyway, I was really thrilled to get Nicole's painting on the cover. So here I am in Seattle, Washington. Are you familiar with Seattle? Have any of you ever been to Seattle? So Seattle, Washington has one of the world's largest populations of crows. In fact, the Bothell campus, the university at the edge of the city, has an international crow research center. That rookery has 16,000 crows living together. Can you imagine that? I've been there to see it. They cross the campus twice a day, and they darken the sky, and they shit and scream on everybody. When you've got 16,000 crows living together, you are not in control, and you're not going to be. And I like that. I like when creatures have the upper hand. So I started feeding. So behind the crow, you can see the water behind the trees. That's Elliott Bay, and then the Pacific Ocean is like right over here. It goes right into the Pacific. So I started feeding the crows on the ledge of this little apartment. And the crows came all day long. I was witnessing crow justice. So what you see over here, on this side, see the cursor, on this side over here, there's a courtyard, and then there's another apartment that's parallel to mine. And there were crows that would sit on this man's balcony at dawn to have a conversation. And he would get out with a broom and like shoo them off, and they would attack him. In fact, they have facial recognition, crows. Whenever he would go to his car, they would dive bomb him and scream. And he actually left because the crows just kept coming. The reason scared, when I was a kid, I grew up in, I was born in Topeka, Kansas, and my grandmother in Iowa, which is in the middle of the United States, there were scarecrows everywhere. And I said, what are these scarecrows? She's like, because you don't dare harm a crow. If you harm a crow, there's always most crows watching, and they'll send all the crows to eat your field. They believe in justice. Hi. There's cushions here if you would. There's space over here as well. Thank you. Can you see this? Okay, good. And it wasn't just people. I'm talking about Seattle, Washington. Just to catch you up. Yeah, it's overrated. It's not that wonderful. It's overrated, like everything in America. But thank you. But I didn't just see the crows attack people. House cats. The house cats of Seattle, Washington live in absolute terror. You see them running from tree trunk to tree trunk, and the crows follow above just screaming at the crash. We see you, cat. You just throw things at them. You can't escape us. So I kind of like the crow justice of Seattle. This crow started having lunch with me every day. This was the crow that didn't just take. I would put in the little hummus container crackers and nuts and berries. And when it was really hot out, I would put frozen cherries. That they love those. And this is a rainforest. I don't know if you're familiar with it. So Seattle's in the heart of one of the world's non-tropical rainforests. And so it rained. I didn't see the sun for 110 days. It rained every day. It was horrible. This was a nice day that I took this picture. Very rare. Like I said, it's overrated. And this crow eventually allowed me to stroke their beak. And this little bit of like very fuzzy feathers appear. And then they started bringing me these gifts. So the first gift they brought me was this twig. There are pictures of all of those things in the book as well, but they're black and white, so this is like a color picture. So the first gift was this little twig. And you know what COVID lockdown was like. It was, you thought maybe I'm, losing it up here. Because it was up there for a while before this started. And I was like, maybe I'm just imagining this as a gift for me. But the thing is, the crow would pick it up and shake it. And then sit it down. Hello. There's cushions there. He would pick up the twig and then shake it and sit it down and tap the glass and then repeat it. It seemed like it was for me. But when the second gift came, you can see this little tiny nub of translucent plastic. When that arrived, it was pretty clear that this was a decision that they were making. Like, I know who's going to like this. And I'll give them this, and I'll take some nuts and berries and crackers. The crows were really good at loading their beaks up with lots of things. And their beaks would be just laden with things. Because, they're smart and they're like not putting up with any. They're like the seagulls, there would be a couple of seagulls who would try to get there. And the crows would just come down and just like attack the seagulls. So nobody has their way unless the crows allow it. That's my experience. And lucky for me, they liked me. And then the third gift was a little berry seed. And then this crow thought I needed a lot of 4, 5, 6, and 7, this other kind of seed. And then number 8 was a linden tree seed. And linden trees are not native to Seattle because it's a rainforest. And number 9 is the pine trees. It's a rainforest with trillions of pine trees in the forest. And then number 10 was a piece of commercial cat food. You see that the crow had a hard time letting go of that. Just like, I don't know if I really want to barter this. I'm like, I'm vegan, just take it, I'm not going to eat it. But they left it for me because they're true to their system of bartering. And then number 11 was this beautiful little green like a little bouquet, so could there be. But number 12 is a piece of gold foil that I keep in my wallet at all times if you want to see it later. And the thing is, on the evening of the first gift, the twig, I had a dream that the crow brought me gold. And then on the 12th gift, I got gold. Which is like the 12 days of Christmas, right? You get gold eventually. Yeah, anyway, so that was lovely. Oh, and then after this, let me make it a little smaller. So then, I'm a Capricorn, which means that we're really good alone. Like COVID lockdown was fine for me. I was not having any problems with it. My Pisces friends were constantly calling me up like, oh my God, you know, it's like, let's write a poem together. Calm down, it'll be all right. No, it's really, it was hard on my Pisces friends, more than anybody ever did. But anyway, we're really good alone. We're so good alone that nobody was going to artist residencies after COVID lockdown. Nobody's like, I don't want to be alone. But I did. I was like, oh my God, I could get into any residency I want. So I wanted to go to the Mojave Desert, which is in Southern California, and Joshua Tree. And I got into this residency, and I said this, but you know what I want to do, right? I want to feed the animals. And like, we know that. That's why we're going to put you in this house. They put me in a house way out in the desert to not bother. Like, I had to drive through sand to get there. And I would fill the yard with food for the coyotes, and they would howl in the evening to let everybody know they found food. And then you could hear they would locate with the howl, and they would locate there. And then by the time they all arrived, it was dark, and I could see their silhouettes, just very excited. And then this is when I started to embody the creatures for the book, where as they're eating, the coyotes are eating, I vigorously rub the back of my ears, and then just enough so that it's just a slight burn, not a burn, but like just enough so while I'm writing I can feel it. And then I was in Italy working with the artist Jason Dodge at the Macro, the Modern Museum in Rome. I asked the museum, I'm one of these kind of, I'm not pushy, but I'm assertive kind of poet who's like, you know, the art world often treats poets like the ugly cousins of the art world. Not here at Last Tango, which is nice. But, and I said, but I want to be an exhibit in your museum. They're like, what? I said, no, I want to live in the museum for 11 days. They were like, it took a lot to negotiate, but they eventually let me do it. It was supposed to be for a month, and then they were like, no, just 11 days. So I got to live in the museum, and I got to be with the artwork at 3 in the morning if I wanted. But then every morning I would race to watch the sunrise and feed the pigeons and the rats. And the rats of Rome, they're just lovely creatures, and I think somebody's like shampooing them and blow drying them. They're very fluffy. And I was feeding the rats with this woman who was, you know, she looked, so I'm almost 60, she looked like she was almost 80. And she was like, the police, you know, they'll arrest you for feeding rats around here. So it's like, she showed me how to feed the rats so nobody could see it. Because she fed the rats every day. And anyway, we had fun feeding rats and pigeons together. And then I went to Tucson, Arizona, which is where I'm going to have my next solo show at the Museum of MoCA, and it's Tucson. Where the poems stand up, because all my poems stand on the bottom of the page. They're like creatures. Okay, let me just, can you see that? Okay, good. So you see how they stand on the bottom of the page? Let me read some of these poems from the new book. Also, again, thank you, Last Tango, everybody, for making this beautiful broadside. There a fold-out over here for everybody. Poems from the new book and poems from the brand new project I'm working on. After I read the poems from the new book, I'm going to briefly end with just a few poems from the new project I'm working on. Our first lightning strike was convulsive. We felt sad for our violence after exterminating wolves and bison. We do not need a doctor to say, dance, 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 before the song runs out. Learn how to live so wilderness never becomes mythology. We put them in parks to be wild on purpose. A museum of fur, fangs, and hooves.
Excuse me just a second. Part of this forest tastes like the man I love, with an actual number of nails holding the bedroom together. Other days when we died where we fell, we became the forest. My car never intended to be a meat grinder, another face going under the waves. We felt awful after hitting the deer. We made love and slept with one of his antlers between us. It's weird reading from this book because this is a person I broke up with. Do you mind if I just briefly tell you what happened? Because, I told you about living on the road, writing A Man in Paradise, right? Let me just back up to that book. So, yeah, just the cover. So while I was writing this, I was living on the road writing it, and I was in Iowa. If you've ever not been to Iowa, that on Route 80 in Iowa is the world's largest truck stop. It's like a city. It's such a big truck stop. And this man picks me up. He's like interested in me, and I was like thinking, oh, I really hope he is driving one of those Walmart. You ever hear of Walmart? These giant retail stores. They're just awful, like everything in America. And anyway, and it was. He does Walmart truck driver. But the thing is, what I liked about this relationship was that we kept meeting. We would coordinate meeting. So it was the first relationship in my life. I've never even heard of another relationship like this, where you see the person in a different location each time. We never saw one another in the same location. We went to all the lower 48 states like that, from one end of Canada to the other, and then we did spend a week together in Mexico. But anyway, he looks like a truck driver, and what I mean is he's not visible. I'm visible. The United States can see me and they right away there's judgment. But with him, he looks like a truck driver. So he's never been visible before me. He's been this kind of quiet, gay guy, kind of like living. You know what I mean? But things started happening with me around, which are going to happen. And especially in the middle of the country. And, it started happening where people would be really drunk at a bar and say, we don't like faggots around here. And they would have their guns, because you can carry guns. This was in Montana, where everybody has a gun right on them. And I was like, and I have a way of dealing with these men, because as I told you earlier, I had a boyfriend who was murdered. That's how this whole thing, today's thing started, talking about him. So what I do is I just say, you're very lucky, because everybody hates us. You're good for you, and they're kind of thrown off like, huh? It's just enough time to be like, bop, and get the hell out. That's what I want to do, because then I want to die. I like being alive. That's not what he would do. He would start getting into these huge things where people are pulling knives and guns, and somebody's about to break a chair over my head, which I'm not going to survive. And then it just becomes these horrible things, and it'd be me like, you're going to get us murdered out here. This is no joke. And it kept happening, and finally just was like, this is finished. I can't do this anymore. So, but it's weird reading this book, because I, had to leave that relationship. This is literally how I feel about this book, this poem. Because while I was writing A Man in Paradise with all those extinct animal sounds, I was like, I gotta work with creatures who are alive now. I can't be doing this. So that's where this comes in. This is also on the broadside. I think this one is. Maybe I'm wrong about that. To desire the world as it is, not as it was. Falling feather attaches to new life. For a moment, when the hammer approached, we thought, is that thing coming this way? We are the fractal. Drop to your own harmonics and the muffled underground hum of seeds. Remember our metal skin when the planet first caught fire. It was years before we understood the awful thing we held to our chest. Whenever a poem can send into the future, please send the breath we've been trying to catch for as long
as you can hold it. So glad you came by. Thank you, as always. So this was published by Ann Boyer, if you remember Ann Boyer, in the New York Times, which is very fancy. I'm not a fan of the New York Times. I'm convinced that if I had to line up in this room right now, who's most responsible for the American-led invasion of Iraq on those lies of weapons of mass destruction, New York Times is number one, most responsible. They wrote 6 articles lying about weapons of mass destruction. They apologized, big deal. 360,000 civilians lost their lives to date. And my President Biden, just killed 7 more people last week in Iraq. It's just, these no more, like no more war, no more of this, but it's accelerating, it's not declining. Anyway, Anne wrote to me and she said, I'm sorry people are trashing your poem online. I was like, oh, let me see what this is about. Like, I don't care what these people say. And it's these crabby old men that are like, you don't know how to write a poem. And they're like, and they're rewriting my poem in the comments. And I just thank them, like, thank you, Daddy. And then in parentheses, your poor wife. I have to put up with you. We stopped studying the night sky for directions. If someone said we made it up, planet Earth isn't real, we would try to verify, try to be sure. Critics are the evidence we do not trust ourselves. Your imagination is asking for parole. What is your verdict, Warden? Try to always remember the calendar made of light our ancestors followed to pass the year. Refrigerators are where we keep our bodies before they become our bodies, spinning inside routines this living provides. We sense language travel on our constant breath. Open a friend's refrigerator to yell, hello, future friend. Human beings are a symptom of the Big Bang. Gun stores fill with shoppers. Bombs mark the sky with our pledge. And that really is true during COVID. My mother died while I was writing this book. And my cousin, I come from this like long line of like really treacherous American-Irish people. And I'm a quarter Danish and 3/4 Irish. My Irish side of the family are just like the worst. They don't speak to me. But they came in the middle of the night while my mother's in the hospital and stole all of her guns. She had 32 guns in the house. My family has so many guns. Why do you need more guns? But anyway, that's just what I want to say about that. A little additive. Horrible people. Thumbing through calendars of the future till touching a year out of reach. Me a ghost, you a ghost. Another poem dedicated to the great vanishing trick. We build muscles, organs, bones at separate tables of our favorite restaurant, chewing to motion kept to the tides. And I dedicate this to President Joe Biden, who I voted for, but I will not vote for again. After $863 billion was spent last year on weapons of war being shipped all over the world right now, I don't know what to tell you, but I'm not gonna vote for him. All my friends and I call him Armageddon Joe at this point. Like he's leading us right into World War III. Our little places within are not dungeons, remember. Astronomers point satellites into space. The military points them down at us. The inverse relationship between what we offer and what we give. This on and off button is another opportunity to believe there are only 2 choices. This too must end. Don't worry. Darkness always accuses us of falling on purpose. You know how to bulldoze me back up these hills. What does darkness know of light filling your navel in the middle of the afternoon? We have not lost our place in line, shaking off the cold. Let's get this garden planted. Give our fruit away to one another. Do you like your species? is my latest questionnaire. Meet me at the quarry where Michelangelo conjured David, falling as felt all over the body the next day. Imagine trees herding on the forest floor, our every cell singing the ghost of we shall rise again. If you call this planet evil one more time, I will have to learn to hold you better. And I do say that because when I was a child, I was remembering this while writing this book. Like I said earlier, the Christians we're dealing with in the United States are very different than your Christians. These are the witch-brain Christians you got rid of 500 years ago or longer. And when I was a child in the 1970s, there was well-intentioned environmental activists trying to start a recycling campaign in the county. Oh my God, they came to our school, showed us pictures of polluted oceans and stuff. We all freaked out and went and told our parents we got to restart recycling. And they acted like the Soviet Union was trying to invade us. You know, they were like, how dare they tell us what to do with our garbage? And that Sunday at church, now this is where I go into where monotheism really does have a lot to do with this, global warming. The entire sermon that Sunday by the pastor, because most of the congregation is illiterate, so he has this phrase that he would use so that everybody would use it with them. Like, you know that was the phrase of the week and everybody got to repeat it. He had a tone that he would use with it, you know. And that week it was, don't they know Jesus is coming? And he read from the book of Genesis about God giving us the planet to do with whatever we want, whenever we want it. Like, we can do whatever we want with this planet and these creatures. It's nobody's business but God's. And it's just like, that's dangerous religion, in my opinion, for the planet and the other creatures. And anyway, that's where all that comes from. I was like, oh. So then my mother dies, and this is part of where my mother dies. A shotgun above every door where I grew up. I did not mean to get her ashes on my shoes. I will wait to walk in the rain, refusing to exert the stress of time. Everyone envied everyone's shotgun behind their backs. Our favorite game when I was a baby was to throw me off the roof and run downstairs to catch me. Oh, how we laughed. So that's that one. Now I'm going to finish with just a little bit from the new project. The new project is called First Light. I watched the sunrise. I didn't watch it this morning because I slept through it this morning. But I try to watch the sunrise wherever I'm at. And then later on in the day, I watch the sunrise somewhere else on the planet on an outdoor webcam. The top one there is in Istanbul, and down here is the Tokyo rail yards. And my idea is, so I just keep stitching these together, and I want to go around the globe watching the sunrise all around the planet. And then when I'm finished writing the book, when I'm finished doing this, I don't know when that's over. I never know when these things are over. I'm going to go to the doctor's office. I'm going to try to watch them 24 hours, the sunrise 24 hours a day on these webcams. And then I'm going to, at the moment it's not working out, but then I'm going to go to the doctor's office and be hypnotized to remember the first time I saw sunlight as a child. So let me just finish with just a few of these brand new poems. They're also on the broadside that Last Tango beautifully made. Go ahead, call me a child for asking, is there no war somewhere? Instead of this daily butterfly fighting suck a fan blade. You should break up is my only relationship advice. On the way to slaughter, pigs on truck pass deer with broken neck. Where love is merely an afterthought, we must banish the intrusions or become them. We forget the Pledge of Allegiance on the path to finding no. A flower widening a crack in the rock. When we excel as father's least favorite, it's time to put a foot in the poem. I tell you, there's nothing like waking in the flutter, passing hours of barbed wire across America, the road beneath us, the only public space. So this is the last one. This is one of the newest ones that just finished a week Fruit fly born in hotel room, died in hotel room. You think I asked for this dream? Spanning an entire known world. I might dance around you if I get a pair of bunny pants. No one can afford to lose love. I have explored the alternative. It is a wasteland. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
So if we have any questions in the room, please.
Oh, right. Does anybody have any questions?
I wanted to ask you a simple question about what you think when you're creating the poems formally.
Oh, right.
If they're coming from the ground, or is there some kind of way of coming?
Like the shaping of them. Okay. Well, it's a bit of a strange answer probably. But I really do believe in what artists have been saying for thousands of years, that we work with spirits. You know, some call them muses, ghosts, spirits, spooks, you know. It's real. They're absolutely real. I wouldn't be able to do what I do without all this coming through me. And I'll tell you, I started writing in 1975. I didn't start using these rituals till 2005. So between 1975 and 2005, most of my poems are on the left margin. But once I start, from the very first one of these poems with the rituals in 2005, when I started actually taking all my notes from the ritual and turning them into a poem, I thought that I was coming down with the flu, or I thought I was getting sick because I felt like vomiting. So, but then I would like walk away and then I would feel better. Every time I would sit down to try to write that, I would feel like throwing up. And then I just started intuitively moving them off the margin, and then I was fine. I realized that these spirits were like, no, we're going to make you throw up because we want you to feel how we feel when they're on the... And then I woke up that next morning, and this like really deep voice came just as I was waking up that said, we've been trying to show you the way out of the violence of the line, this human-made line. So I just surrendered to it, and I never know what they're going to look like. But they always seem to be little bodies. Yeah, that's all I can tell you.
Thank you so much for sharing the story with us. What do you read and how do you read?
What do I read?
Yeah.
Oh, I read poetry. How do I read? I like reading in the sunshine the most. But I'll read anywhere. I do. I love reading. There's something about reading in the light coming from outer space, you know. It takes about 9 minutes traveling through outer space to get here. So it's just really kind of nice to be soaking in that when you're reading another human's poems. Yeah, I just read poetry mostly. I have nothing against prose. I mean, I do write the prose for the rituals. You know, I write it out, but it's the last thing I do. I'm just, like, the thing is about the prose writing, I mean, it's all connected. There's not a lot of, it's not very interesting to me. I find poetry interesting because when you read a poem, you're co-creating with the poet. So we're not stitching things together. Like you saw, my poems are just little snippets of things, and the bridge is you. So you literally, you are literally co-creating with the poet. And when I meet people who say they hate reading poetry, I don't say it out loud because what's the point, you know? Because that's who they are. And I just think to myself, well, maybe they're a lazy reader. They want to be led through a story. Fine, you know, nothing wrong with that. You're reading a novel. There's nothing wrong with that. But that's for them, you know. Poetry is difficult because you're required to be creative. And I think people who hate poetry are people who are afraid of their creativity, maybe. Because everybody's creative. Every human being is creative, but very few of us tend to get to nurture it into our craft that we want. I feel very fortunate
to be this age and doing my work. Because when I was a teenager in my early 20s, I had many, many, many friends also who were artists of all kinds, and almost none of them do their work anymore. Almost every artist I've ever known stops. So it's and I teach it in Sandburg. This is like it's over 15 years I've been teaching it in Amsterdam at the Art Institute at Sandburg. And, I tell those students when I go there, the reason they have me here is to show you longevity of your praxis with these rituals, how to keep going. Because this world is designed to really just rub you down. This stupid idea of this planet, like jobs, landlords, these ideas are really awful. There's gotta be something better than what we're doing. Clearly, we're not doing the right things, right? That was not part of why you asked me. It just sort of turned into that. Are there any other questions? Yes.
I wanted to hear a bit more. I seem to have missed something about the projects in Istanbul and Tokyo.
Oh, yes. I watch the sunrise wherever I'm at, like in person. Like I'll watch it rise. And then later in the day, I'll go online to an outdoor public webcam and watch the sunrise. Like I'll see what time is the sunrise in Istanbul. Then I'll go to that webcam that I showed, and you can watch the sky turn pink, and then that mosque just gets bathed in the colors. And the Tokyo rail yard one that I showed you, those glass buildings are they're like electric in the morning. They're just beautiful colors.
And so the project itself is what? Or what will you do with what? With film?
Oh, well, I'm writing notes for the poem when I'm watching the sunrise.
Oh, okay.
So I'm writing twice a day. And then I'm going to eventually watch it 24 hours. I'm not into extreme sports or anything to experience sunrise all day long once in my life. And then see if the doctor can. I don't think I'm going to be easy to hypnotize. My Irish grandmother always said the Irish can't be hypnotized. And she always, she had that quote from Freud. My Irish grandmother was very proud of that. You know what Freud said? Freud said that the Irish are the one group who cannot benefit from psychoanalysis because they're busy trying to figure out how they're trying to get, they're always looking for lies, like the British Empire's in there somewhere, screwing around with people. So, I don't know, maybe she's right.
Where's home base? Is that Seattle?
No, now I live in, so I taught for a year at UMass Amherst. So, and I had to get an apartment for that. So I have a tiny little apartment in Greenfield, Massachusetts.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why I have it, though I'm never there, but that's all. Oh, yes. In the back, there's one, and then I'll get to you, sorry.
Okay. Yeah, I was wondering, since you said that you've been teaching for that long, I'm curious about your approach to teaching and whether somatics are part of that.
Oh, yeah, that's exactly what I teach there. Well, I do studio visits, but there's a 3-year, the master's is 3 years. So the first year students are always asked to see me for a few days, and I go over the rituals and work with them on, what to do when you're stuck. Are you stuck now? If you are, I'm like, I'm definitely going to bring this up tomorrow in the workshop, but there was a student that I had last year. I'm not going to use anybody's name, but she was very depressed. She was the first year, and I said, what's the matter? She said, well, in the country where I come from, I was nominated for an award, and I was the youngest person to ever be nominated for this award, and I didn't get it, and I haven't touched my art in 6 months. I said, you're 21 years old, and you've already not been doing your work for half a year because you're upset about an award. I was like, listen, you really need to know, this is, you're gonna ruin yourself. Do you really want to be an artist? She's like, well, yes, that's what I mean. I was like, you need to stop that, that's an intrusion. That's the whole thing where I'm talking about intrusions, getting them out of us. Because if you don't, you gotta work on those voices. They're gonna ruin you eventually. Yeah. What was your question again? Oh, do I teach the rituals? Yeah, I teach the rituals around any problems that they might be having with their work to try to figure out where to go. Like I had a ritual with this other student at Sandburg who was from Warsaw originally, and she was at another art school before she went to Amsterdam. And in that school, there were these older men that would yell at her and demean her and humiliate her and tell her nobody's going to take you seriously because your paintings are so small. Because she just liked doing small paintings, and they were like, nobody's going to take. There's just this like size thing, you know, this dude thing, and she was very upset. It was really upsetting to her, and then I go into her studio and she's got this giant painting she's working on. I'm like, what are you doing? You don't like doing this? She's like, it's going to destroy me or I'll destroy it. I was like, this is ridiculous. Can we please get those men out of you? They don't belong. They don't deserve to be inside of you. I don't know why anybody teaches art that's going to harm students like that. They should all be fired. They should be working at McDonald's flipping burgers. That's it. They shouldn't even work with the customers at McDonald's, just in the back making French fries. And I was like, here's what we're going to do. I was like, enough with this painting. We went and found a big piece of cardboard in the scrap room, the size of the painting, and we cut 1/4 of it out and put her, I said, now just paint this little part of the painting. And then flip it and just paint this little part of the painting. And then flip it this way. So we made a bunch of 4 little paintings out of this one big painting. And that was how she was able to do it. But I was like, you don't even need to ever do a big painting. Who cares? You know what I mean? I said, look, Frida Kahlo, have you ever seen her paintings? None of them are big. They're all this big, you know, at the biggest. The biggest is like this big. And it's true, and, you know, she was disabled in a wheelchair, which is mostly why, but still, you know, this is this nonsense. But I'm just saying that there are a lot of things that students need to address when they're in art school to help them for the future, if you intend to be an artist the rest of your life. Oh, and yeah, sorry.
Yeah, it's a slightly strange question, but I'm just interested in your perspective, given all the things you talked about. I just wonder what you think of the internet.
Oh, the internet? Oh my God, I think human beings have been waiting for it for generations. This place to finally meet. I mean, it's going to destroy us, I'm sure, eventually, but at the moment, it's a place for us to gather, I find, and share information and ideas at such a rate that is extraordinary. Protests, like Occupy Wall Street. You know, I became addicted to going up to New York City to see this when I was living in Philadelphia at the time. I was up in New York City the first time I went to it, and then the next times I went, I just went up just to go there. And those young people, well, they were younger, this is 2009, you know, we're talking about, the internet was everything for their ability to do this. And one of the things I loved about them is that they, through the internet, looked at every single type of activist movement that they could look at, and the thing that weakened all of them were the leaders. So they did away with leaders. There were no leaders. Occupy Wall Street was brilliant. Not one leader, none. They got rid of all, like everybody had a place there. And the internet helped them communicate very quickly when the police were coming on their phones. And every time the police, and also I want to say this, back to art students. Almost everybody at Zuccotti Park on Wall Street was an art student or a creative writing student, almost all of them. And I watched them use their creativity. When the police confiscated all their bullhorns. So then they got together with all the creative energy and they came up with the human microphone. You know, when somebody speaks, then you repeat it around you till everybody can hear it. Whatever the police did, these creative young people were just finding ways around it. And I know you asked about the internet, but it does play a role in it, you know, and I really love that, getting to see them use it in this positive way. And also I want to say it was the first time, you know, I've been going to political rallies and marches since the 80s, and Occupy Wall Street was the first time ever that I saw that young women had equal footing. Because there's usually these bossy anarchist boys, you know, you run a drum in the evening until everybody's sick of their drum. But they're always drumming. But the thing is, which is nice to hear for a while, but you know, the thing is, without any leaders, they had no leverage over these young women. And I remember watching, there were these like awful bankers in tuxedos having champagne and toasting us from their balcony when we were down there protesting. And there was a young woman with her sign, you know, like she's got her sign, she's like saying something to them, chanting. And this young man, you could tell he just wanted to like ask her out for a date, but he was being awkward. He went around it the wrong way though. He said, you know, if you hold your sign a certain way, people see it better. And she turned and said, fuck you, get your own sign. That was new. the young women had so much equal, they were just like, don't tell me what to do. And I love that about Occupy Wall Street. It was like gender equity like I'd never witnessed before in a political movement. Yeah. Any other question?
The workshop tomorrow,
Oh,
can you just tell a little bit what that is? Can we
Oh.
still sign up?
I don't know if you can, are there still
You can just come.
You can just come. Oh, how about that? Just come.
Shahala, yes?
Yes.
What time?
I think 11.
Sorry?
11.
11, okay, perfect.
So tomorrow's workshop, I'm going to focus mostly on, well, the rituals for anybody to use, but I want to really focus on intrusions, helping people to understand these voices inside of us that eventually shut you down creatively.
Sounds great.
Yeah, that's what I really want to focus on. Mostly when I'm invited to the workshops now, that's what they're asking for. If it's like a one-off workshop. Now, if I teach for a semester, the very first 10, 15 minutes of each class on the chalkboard, I'll write in all capital letters, intrusions, and underline it, and hand the chalk. Everybody gets up there. Because we all work on this together. Because if you don't, you're eventually not going to, you're just not going to continue. This world is just designed to destroy us creatively. We're supposed to just consume the creativity of other people on Netflix or whatever. You're not supposed to be creative.
I have a question then to that, and the young woman who painted the small paintings.
Yeah.
I'm happy to say things are changing dramatically, but I spent most of my career in an extremely sexist environment. It means someone can encourage you to be yourself, but when you get out there, the men have all the power, make all the decisions, and they do it from their own optics. So I'm sure no one can hear me over there. And so there's a kind of a half-truth in the idea, just be yourself. If you're able to be in an environment where you can then determine how you get out there with your work. So
That's true.
what do you do with that?
Well, can I just answer it this way? So when I was a child in the 70s, there were just a little over 2 billion people. Now there are over 8 billion people. And the thing is, and we're still growing. I think
What's the 2 billion? What's the number? 2 billion and 8 billion is the number?
Well, when I was a child in the 70s, there were 2 billion people on the planet.
On the planet, oh really?
And now there are 8 billion people.
Oh, okay.
My point is, the age of the artist, man, like all that shit's coming to an end.
Yeah.
And these young people who I work with, they don't even care about any of
That's
that.
great.
And I feel like those days are over. I really do.
That's great.
I hope I'm right. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. With all the war going on, that's men doing that, so. What, Andrea Dworkin, you know Andrea Dworkin? This like hardcore lesbian separatist from the 70s. I got to meet her once. I don't know what she's like now, but when I met her back then, she'd be like, war is menstruation envy. And she went into this whole thing about war is menstruation envy. She had this whole theory about it, and I think she's right. That's not answering you, I'm sorry. I don't know what the solution is. But I really don't, I'm not really interested in teaching people how to fit themselves into a market. When I first started working like I'm working now, like it would be, like I told you, all these men were attacking me on the New York Times, like, what are you doing, writing poems like that? Like you're supposed to write them in couplets and all this stuff. And I'm like, not doing any of that. But, it sort of feels like a conversation from another century. And I don't mean the 20th century, like the 19th century. They're having, concrete poetry existed in the early, like 100 years ago. They're just really behind. Sad. No, but I hear you. It is like the Guerrilla Girls. The Guerrilla Girls, this art. So, I was just in New York City a month and a half ago for a book party for my new book. And I was pretty near, Times Square, where all the big shows are. And I went into the bathroom stall, and the Guerrilla Girls had posters inside the stall that would say, in 1924, there were only 2% of the directors on Broadway were women. In 2024, only 2% of the women, 2% of the directors are women. It's like the same number, just like you were saying. So they were like pointing out like a whole century's gone by and it's still the same thing going on. I like the Gorilla Girls. But the Gorilla Girls have to like hide their identity. Some of them are known in the art world, but they don't let anybody know their identity because they'll be attacked. So I guess that's still going on. Anything else? Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.